All right, welcome to part 2 of this redesign series. In this part, I'm going to show you my actual design process when redesigning the app, in this case, the eToro Investing app. Now, if you haven't checked out part 1 yet, please do, because it will help you understand the content of this video. Now, with that said, let's dive right into part 2. So first, I'm going to create wireframes. Wireframes are the meat and potatoes of a UX design project. So before we get into typical design questions like color, typography, we want to map out the user flow from screen to screen. So before we define what the app looks like, we need to know how the app works. We want to show how the user uses the app, how they navigate between screens, and how they complete tasks. And only when we have this flow laid out crystal clear, then we'll add all the bells and whistles, and that's where the real UI design begins. Now, I've used wireframing tools like Balsamiq before, and I'm a big fan, but today I'm going to try something different. I'm going to try and using Procreate on my iPad. Procreate is normally used as an illustration app, but I've been testing its features, and I think I can actually do a decent wireframing on the app too. And I've always been wanting to involve the iPad more into my design workflow because I've seen designers do amazing things on their iPad. So today I'm going to give it a go. Alright, when this is finished, I'll airdrop the wireframes to my MacBook and import them in a sketch file. Now, I know a lot of designers are switching over to Figma because of the collaboration features, but I have to say I'm a big Sketch fan. I think Sketch is more user-friendly, has better features for creating a design library and for creating responsive designs. But then again, for collaboration, Figma's probably a better choice. I'm going to try to create a more hi-fi wireframe. All right, I've got my hi-fi wireframes set up. Again, this is in no way perfect. We're not focusing on perfecting the design yet. We're still focused on overall layout, getting the flow right. So I set up different screens. So we've got our browse screen, our inspect screen, and our trading screen. We've added some elements like a bottom navigation and a top bar. We added the stock cards here as well. So we're getting a basic idea of how the app works. And as you can see, I'm still working in grayscale. I'm not using color at this stage. Why? Because this forces me to use layout and size as prime design elements. If I can only use layout as a design element, as a way to give visual hierarchy to the screen, then I better damn make sure that I have good layout because I can't rely on color, right? And once I have the perfect layout, then I'll add some colors. All right, so I've tried to clean this up a little bit. Now with this basic layout in front of me, the important UX questions are starting to get clear. For example, on this screen where the user is deciding how much Google stock they want to trade. Do these buttons, do they even make sense? I know I've based myself on the previous design, but looking at it right now, is this really user-friendly? Doesn't it make more sense to let the user input the values themselves? Another question is, what if someone doesn't want to trade $1,000 of Google stock right now, but they want to order it when the stock increases by a certain percentage? Then if they click here on order, then we need an extra screen, right? We need an extra tab or a card. We need to add something. And if we do, does it make more sense to use other input fields, like using a slider instead of these buttons, for example? Let's say that the user only wants to buy Alphabet stock when the current value increases by 10%. Then I think it's better to use sliders here to let them pick this instead of adding these buttons, because these buttons, they will work with increments that we have to set. while a slider will give the user total control, right? So these are the kind of questions that we want to focus on as early as possible, right? We want to solve these problems. Now, I am not going to figure out these problems by myself. And if I could, I would never share this with you guys because I would make my own app and get filthy rich. So we're going to pretend that this is a decent layout so we can skip to the next part, the real UI design, colors. All right, so let's talk about color. Basically, we need 3 types of colors. We need one as a primary color for primary actions like buttons. We need a secondary one as an accent color for things like highlighting important information like new updates. And we need a set of grays for backgrounds and whatnot. Those are the 3 types of colors that we're going to create. Now for the first one, for the primary color, we're going to use a color tool. Now this is where UI design differs from graphic design. The classic method that designers create color palettes is they go to a tool like Adobe Color, they choose the complementary color palette, and they start playing around with the colors here. Let's say that we want to use this green. Now, this is useless for me because it chooses this red-orange color, and I don't like this. For an investing app, red is too much associated with danger, excitement, and risk, and we can't have that for an investing app. We want the app to feel safe and secure. So let's use our common sense and find a palette scheme that fits the personality and brand of the eToro app. So do I want it to feel secure and professional or fun and playful? Well, kind of both, because it's an investing app and investing means risk. And we want to combat the feeling of risk with the feeling of security. And for security, we're going to choose for something blue, right? So we're going to create our own custom palette here. We're going to keep the green at about here, maybe less saturated. And then I'm going to take matters into my own hands and try and get a nice blue color that I want, right? So these colors, this one right here and this one right there, these are the ones that I want. And now I'm going to go to the Google Material Design tool, and this will help me create a better color palette. So I'm going to input it here as a primary color, and this gives me this color palette for the green. Then we'll go back and get our secondary color, this one. Go back here, add it. Okay, and then what I like to do is click here, View in Color tool. And this will open up a new tab. And this tool is great. You can actually preview your color palette and what it might look like in a typical interface, right? Now this looks awful, so we'll perfect it later on. But first, I really want to get down my base color, my primary color. And I know that I want to use green for this. And now I'm going to optimize it. Now there are no rules for choosing a primary base color, but something that I like to do is pick a color that can work with white text. And for example, we see that it doesn't work. It's not legible. So we're going to tweak it a bit. And now we see it's legible. It's a bit too dark for my taste. So I'm going to try to make it more saturated. Now it works. Still think it's a bit too dark. And I think right about here, that's where we're going to push it. This is the color that I want. This can work for normal text and large text as a primary color. I'm going to go back to my sketch file. And I'm going to add it here. Right, so this is our base color. And we can now start to create a color palette from it. And we can now start to create shades and tints of this color, right? So we want to create darker shades and lighter tints. Now we can actually go back and use the Material Design color tool as well for this. So I just input this color here, and then it generates the palette for us. But for me, it doesn't work because it doesn't create the palette that I want. It chooses this color while I need this one, but I can't use this one because if If I use this one, if I use 20 BB70, you're going to notice that this color isn't legible. It's not legible on white text. So I don't want this one. So what I can do is doing it manually. Now let's see how you create color palettes from scratch. So we need darker shades and lighter tints. And the way that we're going to do this is by, first we'll start with the darkest shade. And as a rule, if you're creating a darker shade, the thing you do is, if you look here at my color picker, you decrease the brightness, right? And you increase the saturation. Now, I've noticed I can't increase the saturation any further. I'm already at the max, so what I might do is decrease the saturation a bit, keeping it the same brightness, so I keep it legible with white text, right? So I'm going to decrease saturation a bit. And then I'm going to reset this. I'm going to start from scratch. And I'm going to decrease the brightness and increase the saturation, right? That's how I create darker shades. And I'm going to push it a bit further because I want this color to work maybe as a text color. All right, so this is getting really dark. That's the extreme end of my shades. Now I'm going to do the same for this one. I'm actually going to have to reset this one as well, I think. Here, we'll do the opposite. We'll increase the brightness and decrease the saturation, right? And we're going to push it really far. And another thing we might want to do is push the hue a bit towards the reds and the yellows. So these are the extreme ends of the color palette. Now you are definitely going to need more colors than this. So what you do is you start filling the holes. And we also do this for our accent color and our grays. And then we get something like this. We have our greens and we have our grays, which I cooled down a little bit to the more blue side because I think it works better with the green. All right, that's color for you. These are definitely enough colors to get us started. Now, systemizing your design elements like this, that's what UI is actually all about. It'll really help you to make quicker decisions and design faster in general. Now, I can move on to the type, and I already know that for a body font, I want to stick with something highly legible and familiar, like Roboto, which is a very popular font, especially for Android. But for the headers, I might go for something more dynamic, like Montserrat. That's something I might want to do. I want to do the same approach for my colors. I want to kind of set up a system here, a scale. And again, I can use tools like Archetype, for example, where I pick a heading font and a mobile and a body font. Then I define the sizes, and eventually it will help me set up an entire type scale. For me right now, I actually don't need this. Why? Because I have the Google material kit actually pre-installed into my library, so I can just add text from here. For example, if I want a button text, then I'll just add it right here and it will appear. So I don't need to set this up right now, but in general, you do want to do this. Something else that we can define early on is shadows and elevation. Shadow can be a very important design element. It shows us the elevation, and elevation shows us the visual hierarchy of an object. Let me explain this a bit. Basically, the further an object is away from its surface, the softer its shadow. So in an interface, this means that the more blurry the shadow, the more softer the shadow of an element, the closer it will be to your face. Because we have to think about UI as a table with objects laid out on it, right? And this means that higher objects, they get blurry shadows like this, while objects that are really close to their surface, which are far from our faces, they will have a very hard, small shadow on the edges like this, right? You can set up a complex shadow scale. I kind of downplayed it and exaggerated it a little bit so you can understand more easily. But these shadows, they will do for now. They will help me to create visual hierarchy with shadows. Something else that I want to show you is that good shadow design has 2 shadows at a minimum. It has the hard shadow near the edges, and it has the softer shadow, the more blurry shadow that spreads out, that has a bigger blur and a bigger Y offset. And actually, these are all the elements that I need to start designing. And as I design and build more screens, I will add these elements to my library, and this will start to build out very nicely. Now, as you can see, there are some titles here: atoms, molecules, organisms, templates. Now, these refer to the atomic design system, and I'm going to explain you what this is. Eventually, we're going to have lots of screens and variations of these screens and variations of design elements. With so many different things, it's easy to lose track, especially when more people are working on this project. That's why it's important to have a system for these elements. And one system that I'm a big fan of is the atomic design system. This is a system that groups elements based on their relations with each other. There are different levels based on structure. At the lowest level, we have the atoms, and these are things like color, shadows, type, buttons, and labels. These are the building blocks of the interface. Then there are molecules. These are atoms that are grouped together and work together to create an action, like a search bar, for example. The atoms are groups of molecules, and the templates are groups of organisms, right? And this is the way we can structure all our design elements. And for smaller projects, it's a bit overkill to create a system like this. But for a client that has digital products on all different platforms, on iOS, on Android, on the web, it's very important to create a system or an ecosystem that keeps everything tied together. Okay, so I'm looking back at my layout, and I'm going to try and add some design elements to this to create a more hi-fi design. Here you can see how I'm using color to show interaction options. And as I move on, this will get more advanced and worked out. And I can work on this and perfect this until I get something that in the end feels like a finished design. So that's how I would tackle this project and redesign this app. When we have a hi-fi design that tells us what the app looks like, we can create a prototype that shows us how the app works, and I'm probably going to make another video about this. All right, I hope you learned a lot from this video, and definitely let me know if you have feedback or criticism. Again, a redesign project for a company like eToro, it wouldn't be up to one person. There would be a team of UX designers, UI designers, and developers behind this. I just wanted to show you a very high-level process of how I would tackle this project if a client wanted to really quickly launch an MVP and wanted to move forward very fast with usable prototypes and user tests. I really like sharing these types of videos. For my next video, I'm hesitating between motion design for UI, advanced UI design tips on color and layout, or logo design. Let me know which video you want in the comments, and see you next time.